Hello, what's up, guys? My name is Rabujan, and I'm going to talk about how the web container handles the request uh, and give back the response to the client. So this is our client. So let's give a name. Let's give a label and say client A. And this is our web server, and we need a web container because the web server is can cannot do that much. It just can give you static content when you need to do more than static content. Let's say you want to give dynamic content, you need a helper application, and that is what the web container is for. The web container is not for uh, helper application. So let's assume this is our web container and label it and as the web container. So yeah, okay. So that's much better. And now what happens is for let's say the user or the client making a request to the uh, making a request to a specific servlet. That server has a let's say that server has a URL. So the client only knows the URL. The client doesn't know uh, which server is that. So we just know this URL is known for this specific server. Uh, so yeah, so the client will make a HTTP request, and the web server takes it, and it handles it to the web container. And the first of all what it does is it checks which URL which server this URL is belong to. So let's say this request is made for uh, servlet A. So let's give a label. Let's say servlet A. And now we are making so this is our servlet A. The servlet, uh, the name is A, and this is a server. So and after that, this servlet will have there will be multiple methods. However, in this case, let's talk about three methods: init, three or four methods: init, uh, service, which will be used mostly uh, through the entire life cycle of the servlet, and the uh, destroy. However, whenever in servlet is instantiated, uh, the init method will be called for the first time. So it will be called only the first time to instantiate the servlet using the web container. And whenever the client makes requests to get or let's say the client making post or get type request, the servlet will be the container will call the service method of the servlet, and the service method uh, uh, will call do get or do post according to the request type. So that's how the server goes. So let's talk about what happens when a client makes a request. So the web container will create two new objects, which are http servlet request and http servlet response. So http servlet request and http servlet response. So these are new objects that is made by uh, the container. Okay, so the container makes these response, makes these two objects and handle it to the servlet using using a thread, a servlet thread. Uh, to be more specific, these two objects will be handled to the servlet using a servlet thread. So the servlet thread gets these objects and get it to the servlet, and servlet will requires these two objects to do the processing, such as the service. When the service method is called, it will call the do get or do post um, according to the client's request type, and it requires these two objects. So the HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet responses um, are the arguments for these service methods, such as do get or do post. So do get and do post methods requires takes these two objects as arguments. So uh, you get uh, request and response. Okay, that's much better. So what happens is then the the request will be processed inside the servlet with all the codes inside this method, inside the do get method, and a response will be also processed, and the response object will be sent back to the container. Also the request also be there, and what happens is the response object will be converted into a HTTP response. So HTTP response, and this HTTP response will be go back as a and this HTTP response will be sent to the server, and the server send it to the client, and the client can view it as a HTML contained in the client's browser. And that's how it goes. So then what happens is when the response is made finished, um, these two will lose their references. So that means these two will be now eligible to these two will be became eligible to garbage collection. And yeah, so that's how it goes. So these two method will be eligible to become eligible to garbage collections. And when the let's say another new client B making the same request for this servlet A, same thing happens. It will come to the web server, and they get the container, process the check the request, and decides this is the server that the client is making the request is for, creates two new objects, which are server request and server response, and handle it through a server thread, and the thread comes to and thread give it to the servlet A, the same server A, because this there will be only one instance, and there will be only one instance. And what happens is it processes a request and give it back a response to the client B. And let's say the client C, or another client making a new request to another different servlet. Let's say client D, or yeah, client, this must be B, this must be C. And when a client makes first request to a new server, a different server for the first time, the init method will be called, uh, and right after the service methods will be also called by the container. And let's assume this is the servlet C, and first tab. So C will be the init method will be called, and the service methods, and the do get or do post according to the request tab. And finally the web container gets back the response and handle it as a HTTP response to the web server, and web server give it as HTML content, and the client C can give it as a HTML content in the client browser. And that's how it pretty much goes. uh, yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.